Hello and welcome to the Raising Athletes podcast. My name is Kirsten Jones. I'm a peak performance and sports parenting coach and author of Raising Empowered Athletes. I started this podcast 8 years ago because as I was on the sidelines looking for answers, I had played D1 volleyball. I had worked at Nike for 15 years. And then I got to kick and chase. And you see all these parents going, well, you got a private coach, right? Like, well, your kid's not going to do this rec thing, right? Like this was 10, 15 years ago. That problem is only exacerbated. When I first started writing the book, it was a $19 billion business, larger than the NFL. It's now a $43 billion business, and it's only growing because we have private equity involved. My two guests today, I'm so excited to talk to you that a new bill has just been presented with Senator Murphy and Representative Deluzio about how do we bring this back so that kids can play. Because what we know is that kids who play sports through the age of 23 has nothing to do with what level you play at, has nothing to do whether you're on a D1, D2. It's that the more you play, the less likely you are to have depression, to have anxiety, to opt out. The more likely you are to be a successful adult because you have skill sets like, overcoming adversity, being a good teammate, learning how to win, learning how to lose. So thank you both for making the time to be here. It's an honor to have you both here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Maybe we can start with you, Senator Murphy. Can you talk to us about how this bill came about and what are the main principles of it?
Yeah, I mean, listen, both Chris and I are, washed up former athletes, but we also know, as you just articulated, what a tremendous benefit sports are to kids. And I actually would argue it's more important today than ever before as these, poisonous phones in our pockets pull kids away from in-person contact as online gaming becomes, much more prolific amongst young kids, especially young men. It's really important that kids have the ability to gain those skills that you talked about through youth sports, just how to get along with people that are different from you, how to bounce back, how to be resilient, how to work as a team. The reality is the cost of youth sports is going way up. Over the last 5 years, the cost to parents has increased by almost 50%. And and as you mentioned, kids are being increasingly pushed into youth sports that feel like professional sports that require families to, spend thousands of dollars traveling all over the universe to compete. A lot of the reason that's happening is because sports have become, like everything else, a source of profit for big investment companies. The hockey league that my 14-year-old plays in is owned by a private equity-backed firm. And their interest is not in making a good experience for my kid and his teammates. It's just pulling as much money as they can out of the parents and the families. So as you mentioned, rec sports levels are really important, especially for kids that have no interest in traveling or playing at a collegiate level. But those opportunities are drying up because for these private equity companies who own a lot of these leagues, there's no money to be made in recreational sports leagues. They make all their money off of these big pro-feeling high pressure travel league. So Chris is in a better position to talk about the details of the bill. He had a lot to do with drafting this. But what we're basically saying is that these private equity companies shouldn't own youth sports, especially the most predatory of them. And we should really make sure that the groups, the not-for-profit, the parent groups that are running our kids' sports leagues have the kids' best interests in mind, are not running sports leagues for kids for the purposes of bilking the families out of thousands of dollars.
Yes. So could you talk about it, Representative Deluzio, about the specifics of the bill and what does it cover and what does it encompass? Because I know a lot of parents, right? Like we assume that, if government's getting involved, there's something I'm not going to like about it. But this actually has a lot to like.
I think so. And the bill is really straightforward. The goal, and Chris Murphy just laid it out for you, the goal is to make sports less of a ripoff. I think it's turned into a luxury item for so many families, and I just think that's wrong. And so we go right at the heart of these vulture practices, as we describe them, that we see out of so many of these companies and firms. We're talking about layering on junk fees and mandatory fees that are hidden but pop up down the road. We're going at practices like the stay to play scheme, where parents and families that want to go play in a tournament that they have to play on to be part of a team are then forced to stay in a very specific hotel, maybe for more than one night, at a rate negotiated by the corporation or the private equity firm, or their kids can't even participate. We go at all these practices, and I could talk about more of them. One of the examples is, and Chris talked about it, having to pay money to have mom or dad or grandma or grandpap watch the video of your kid playing live, where you've got Black Bear, one of these groups that's bought up rinks and leagues, saying that they have the exclusive streaming rights. You can't have live video. All of these kinds of practices, we're going right at them, and we're saying to these kinds of firms, you cannot have ownership in youth sports. So you can't buy new leagues and facilities. And if you've got them, you've got to sell back to the community or back to the places that you bought them from. And where there are violations, and again, we list out these vulture practices, we're saying you got to pay penalties. And those penalties are going to go back as either refunds to the parents you ripped off or back into a fund that will invest in community fields, community rinks and courts, community assets, so that more kids have an opportunity and those rec leagues aren't starved. Not every kid's going to play D1 or big time college sports, but it's really important, I think, that kids through their early years have a shot to play in their community, that working class parents have a shot too. And parents with more resources are just as angry that they're getting bilked by a lot of these players. So the bill is straightforward. Again, it's all about making sure that sports can be more affordable, less of a ripoff, and we're going right at the heart of the bad actors who have turned sports into a luxury item.
Yeah, you quoted it's up almost 50% in 5 years, and that was averaging out to $5,000 per child. But I live in Los Angeles and paying triple that per child at least, right? There, and that's for not a hockey. You get into equipment, into some of these sports, that are so expensive. Like I read in Texas with the Dallas Stars and how they took over basically all the rinks and own, from the bottom up to the point where the parents said, we actually would just like to have more rec. And they said, well, we own the ice. So, good luck with that, essentially. So how do we get this through? What can we do to help?
Yeah, well, listen, this really has nothing to do with partisan politics. I mean, Chris and I are both Democrats, but this is impacting families no matter their political persuasion, if they're political or non-political. And I do think that there's a lot of crossover support here in Congress. There's a lot of Republicans who are upset at the way that these sort of big private equity corporations have come in and ruined, everything from healthcare to youth sports. So we just introduced the bill. So right now we just need help in getting the word out. We'd love for folks who are listening to this to call up your member of Congress and ask them to co-sponsor it. We also think that even if we don't get this bill passed this year, that the shaming exercise that we're involved in might end up changing some of these most abusive practices. I want to pass this bill, but if some of these leagues voluntarily, because of the pressure they're getting from this legislation, stopped some of these junk fees or dropped the requirement that you can only live stream through our paid for service, that would be important as well. I think one of the things that parents can do is let us know what you're seeing. We both have our own individual experiences, but if you're seeing these abusive practices, if you're seeing these rec leagues devalued by the company that owns your kid's league, send an email to Chris's office or to my office, and it'll help us make the case.
I totally agree. And I think the awareness is huge. And so thank you for bringing so much attention to this issue beyond just our legislation, because we hear about these stories. And I've got an example in my part of the world in Western Pennsylvania where you had a long storied community hockey league that once one of these big firms, big companies, bought up the rink, didn't take long where they were getting, hey, you either got to sell to us, or if you don't, your ice time is going away. And ultimately that beloved institution, they had to fold. They didn't have an option. They couldn't find ice time. And so we hear about these stories because folks are willing to speak up and talk to the press or talk to folks like you or us. And so that awareness really helps. It helps us push back. And I think it helps bring more awareness to what folks should be on the lookout for in their community.
And I think there's another side to it too, which is the side that I focus on more, which is, yes, there's the money piece to it. But when people reach out to me when I work with teams or athletes, it's the stress that the parents and the kids are under around what's happening. And usually, my child is throwing up, my child, can't perform, my child wants to opt out altogether. And as I said in the beginning, what we know is if the kids continue to play, it gives them an outlet. It gets them off their phone. It gives them an opportunity to learn these skills. Now coaches that when they watch athletes play, they say, I just need to see if they can actually endure through anything, because everything has been they're funneled through the system, that it's not allowing them to be creative and thoughtful and learn how to win and learn how to lose and learn how to be a great teammate. That all it gets lost because everybody's so focused on the prize. Yet when I talk to parents, I believe parents just want the best for their children. Most people are not delusional that their kids less than 2% will play pro, less than 5% will play D1, D2, D3. That means, 95% of our kids who are playing youth sports are not going to play beyond high school. And I have got women now calling me saying, I just want my son to make the high school baseball team. They have a roster of 48. And, if he can just be on there, then he'll be happy until you're on the roster of 48 and now your kid's not playing, right? Like everything has gotten so competitive so early. And you're right, it's leading to them dropping out. So any last thoughts that we can leave our listeners with?
No, I just said thank you, Kirsten, for raising the awareness on this, and we want to preserve that higher level experience for kids that really want it. What we're worried about is that because those rec leagues don't make a lot of money, they are becoming fewer and far between. We want to make sure that there's an option for every kid out there, and that we preserve that ability for the vast majority of parents and kids who just want to play good competitive sports for fun, who don't want an experience that is so high pressure and so individualized. So ultimately, we want there to be something for everybody, but we're just seeing this disturbing trend as more and more kids are being pushed by force and by these market mechanisms, by greed, really, into these high pressure, very expensive programs. Those will still be good for some kids, but we should have more kids playing at, a more amateur looking level. And hopefully that's where we'll get to.
And is there a way, Representative Deluzio, to actually funnel the money so that it can get back to grassroots? I think that's one of the big questions is, it's great that for the people that can afford pay to play, but for those who don't have access to sport, I'm here in Los Angeles, LA 2028 is coming. They're talking a lot about how do we open the aperture to, allow us all to enjoy sport.
Well, I think our bill is one piece of it, right? We do direct this money back into communities, back to invest in public facilities, but it's broader than just this bill. I think your question to me is about what does our government at every level care about? We should care about kids having opportunities to play on a decent field, on a decent court. We should invest in public facilities. It matters that school districts have the resources to have these leagues across age groups and grades. So look, I care about public investment in our kids. And I think sports is a place where folks just have neglected it. They've really not thought about the connection between giving kids a shot to play and what it means for their success in life. So I think it's a wake-up call maybe that we need more investment in those facilities and the leagues that really ought to be there for kids.
Hallelujah.
I think it can be an and. It doesn't have to be an or, is what you're saying, right? We can do both.
Absolutely.
And so for those parents who want to pay and are happy with we're not taking that away. We're saying we can actually invite more to the table, and which will lead to healthier outcomes in the long run. Yeah. Thank you both so much. Parents, share, follow us. Send your questions to both of them. The more voices we can raise on this issue, I think the quicker we'll be able to, maybe we won't hit it out of the park on the first try, but that's what this whole journey is about. Let's do this. Thank you.
Thank you.